I'm back doing a video for this channel which I haven't done for a bit. Why? Because it's reading week and nobody's here, and when nobody's here, what do? Well, several things I imagine, but one of them should definitely be making videos, if only to have something to do. So at the end of the last video on this channel, which also happens to be the first one, I said I would tell you my thoughts on horror films. I don't know why exactly, because I haven't seen many horror films, and if I'm going to talk about films, I usually do it in the form of film reviews. By the way, I do a film review blog on Tumblr, so if you want to read what I think about films for some reason, then find a link. But I made a half-hearted promise, and what kind of creature would I be if I broke my half-hearted promise? Mostly the same kind, but anyway, horror films! Spooky! Let's just go through the whole mess, shall we? Horror films began with the German Expressionist movement in the 1910s and 20s with prominent films such as Nosferatu, which I reviewed once, and I would recommend if you want to see something different from basically every film you've ever seen, because it's a silent film and the music is sort of on par with the visuals in terms of like prominence in the film. It's almost like a feature-length music video for a film score instead of just like what you would think of as a film. Other famous German Expressionist films include Das Kabinett des Dr. Caligari, which I will watch one day, and I won't enjoy it because look at it. Oof. That's going to be tough. Anyway, moving onwards, you've got the Universal horror films, you know, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, Frankenstein and the Mummy. The Mummy. This is sort of when horror became more popular because it was being manufactured in Hollywood for the first time on like a regular basis. I haven't actually seen any of those films I just mentioned. I had to look up the Horror Universal Factory on Wikipedia because I didn't know what films they'd done. I knew they existed, but that was about it. Then, with the tremendous downfall of the studio systems and their horrible oppression, you have my favourite period of horror cinema, which stretched from the late 60s to the late 70s. You've got groundbreaking stuff like Night of the Living Dead, which basically invented zombies as you know them. George Romero's series on any film that ends of the living dead or of the dead. Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Other of the Deads. They're probably all Romero films. He basically invented zombies, and they're all satires about stuff. The first one is a bit boring, but sort of interesting. More as like a piece of history than it is an entertaining film. Then you got stuff like The Exorcist, which is just great, and it was the first horror film to be nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. You got these fairly low budget, really dark films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and one of my favourite films ever, Alien. The thing I like so much about 70s horror is that they had this real grimy edge to them. Then of course you've got Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is great of course because of Stanley Kubrick. And then moving on to the 80s, you've got the slasher films really, popularised by John Carpenter's Halloween with that music that I'm not allowed to play here because it's probably copywritten. Yeah. From that you've got Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course it being from the 80s, the film's got a lot more cheesy and fun, with a lot of fun sort of gore and grossness, a lot of sort of stretchy, fleshy, blah. Great. You got films like An American Werewolf in London and the Evil Dead films, which are like really pulpy and blend horror with comedy. And of course, you've got the first Hollywood blockbuster, Jaws, which worked so well because they famously had problems with the sharks. They didn't work. They had a bunch of mechanical sharks, and none of them really worked, so they had to shoot it like an Alfred Hitchcock film, which is why it's good. Then in the 90s, things got a bit more meta with stuff like Scream, where horror films started to be about horror films instead of just like trying to scare people. They weren't really telling a story so much as they were making a commentary on horror films, making fun of them, but in like a nice way. Because you know, the Scream films were actually made by Wes Craven, who directed A Nightmare on Elm Street and Last House on the Left and a bunch of other things. Really influential horror director, basically making fun of horror films, but in a knowing way because he made a lot of them. He's dead now, actually. He died quite recently. And of course, then there was the Blair Witch Project, which popularised the found footage genre. And in the noughties, the two big stars were the found footage films and the torture porn. Found footage films, you've got like Cloverfield and Paranormal Activity becoming big hits, and obviously, you know, you've got the torture porn, which is a subgenre which really came into its own in the noughties. I guess you can kind of date both of these back to Cannibal Holocaust, which is kind of found footage and also kind of torture porn, because it's got footage that is found that doesn't make up most of the film but is in it, and a lot of scenes of prolonged horribleness. There are a lot of actual animal deaths in the film, like they literally killed animals in the production of the film. No humans. There was a lawsuit because they thought that they had killed this girl. I'll show you the picture from this. They didn't know that they had to show how they did that because people thought that they'd actually murdered someone. They did murder animals, but they got away with that because I guess that's allowed. Of course, torture porn really sort of became a big thing in the noughties. You got obviously Saw, big thing. Hostel films, you know, the Eli Roth stuff. And then, of course, most controversially of all, the Human Centipede. Yay. I haven't actually watched many of these because I find them a bit sort of pointless. Like, you know, they're not scary, they're just sort of gross, which isn't really what I want in horror. But if that's your thing, go ahead, have fun, enjoy. Great. I mean, I'll probably get around to watching some of them at some point, but, you know, from what I've seen, it just seems a bit there. This decade seems to be largely a continuation of the noughties, at least so far, except there's a complete oversaturation of films about ghosts and demons. Oh my god. Too many. Conjuring, Insidious, all the other ones. Oh, I don't even care anymore. So boring, so boring. Watch The Exorcist and then don't bother anymore. I guess Rosemary's Baby is kind of that. I haven't seen it. Watch it, I guess. It's supposed to be good. Although it was directed by a child molester whose wife was killed by Charles Manson. Crazy. Fucking hell. Oh! Whew. Now that I've accidentally sort of given you a brief overview of the whole of horror cinema, I'm not actually sure how that happened, but anyway. What do I like about horror films? Why am I talking about them in the first place? Well, I'm not entirely sure. I think the thing I like in horror films is sort of the darkness of it all. I think that's why I like 70s ones the best, because even though some of them are pretty dated, there's just this sort of feeling of watching something really messed up happening, and I don't really get that from modern horror because it's too like flashy, it looks too good, it's too polished, which isn't that scary. I also enjoy the practical effects you see in the 70s and 80s film. The gore seems so like fleshy, it's great, it's so gross. Oh, great stuff, great stuff. Yeah, anyway, I like horror films, but don't really watch them that much, so I don't know that much about them, to be honest. You can blame me from September for the quality of this video, but you can blame current me for the quality of the videos coming up this week. That's right, I'm off for the week, so I'll be endeavouring to make a video every single day until I stop doing that. See you tomorrow for my thoughts on living in Bath, which is where I happen to live at the moment. Look forward to it, get excited, freak out. I know you can't wait. Okay, bye.